So in this panel, we'll be hearing from Howdy and kind of wrapping up the summary of the symposia and charting the critical way forward. And then Howdy is joined by again, very distinguished panel that are probably no strangers to anybody in the room. We have Pamela Anderson. She's been the Director General of the International Potato Center since May 2005. SIP is one of 15 international agriculture research centers, as you may know, supported by the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research. She served as an advisor to the Federation of American Scientists and research consultant to Harvard University. She has worked in Latin America for over 34 years. That's longer than I was with the Wall Street Journal, so congratulations on that. And she spent 2 decades working with national agriculture research systems before joining the CGIAR. Then we have Ken Brown, professor, Department of Nutrition at University of California, Davis. And Dr. Brown investigates the causes, complications, treatment, and prevention of childhood malnutrition with a particular focus on zinc and vitamin A. Dr. Brown is the regional advisor for nutrition and child survival for Helen Keller International in Africa. He's currently the chair of the International Zinc Consultative Group, a former member of the Committee on International Nutrition of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, and past president of the Society for International Nutrition Research. He's extremely decorated, including the Kellogg International Nutrition Research Prize and the E.B. McCullum Award of the American Society for Clinical Nutrition. And we also have Arun Joshi. He's presently the coordinating wheat breeder, wheat breeding activities at CIMMYT in South Asia, and the senior wheat breeder at CIMMYT in South Asia. He's also engaged in seed increase and dissemination of disease-resistant wheat varieties in many countries of Asia and Africa. Arun has made numerous contributions in developing several wheat varieties and understanding host pathogen interaction with respect to spot blotch of wheat, which is the #1 pathogen in the eastern Gangetic Plains of South Asia. In addition, he has educated hundreds of farmers through participatory varietal selection and participatory seed production. And that's always important, bringing in the farmers and their thoughts. And we have Dennis Chiteri. Dennis is the Director General of the National Agriculture Research Organization, NARO, of Uganda. In his successful and very distinguished and long scientific career, he, with the team he's been working with, has identified and mapped the first gene, the maize streak virus gene 1, that confers tolerance in maize to maize streak virus disease. And he's also developed several maize varieties that are grown in Uganda and surrounding countries. He's served as chairperson of several national, sub-regional, and regional organizations, networks, and committees, including that of the Forum for Agriculture Research in Africa, FARA, and the Association for Strengthening Agriculture Research in Eastern and Central Africa. And then we also have Francisco Reifschneider. Francisco, he's an advisor to the president of Embrapa, which has been making an amazing and huge difference in food production in the world. Francisco has focused his technical and scientific work on plant pathology and plant breeding, where his work is concentrated on the development of disease-resistant vegetable cultivars and hybrids, which today occupy significant areas in Brazil. Presently, he is a senior researcher at Embrapa and an advisor to the president, and Embrapa is the Brazilian Agriculture Research Corporation. So, a very distinguished panel. They'll have many things to say, and now over to Howdy. Take the long way.
Okay, I've been asked to summarize and talk about the way forward, and I think I'm mostly going to talk about the way forward. I think the rapporteurs did a very good job of summarizing the various workshops. So The first thing I want to talk a little bit about my own learning about the difference between, during these 2 days, 3 days, about the differences between biofortification interventions as compared with supplements and fortification. I've always, realized, of course, that there are long lag times before the first releases. That's always been a problem. But I think what really kind of became clear to me, or sort of crystallized in my mind, is that the agricultural interventions after the releases, they get better over time, but slowly, a few percent each time, but sort of relentlessly. So for example, when you first introduce the biofortified crops, you get a certain percentage of households to adopt in the first year, and that percentage goes up, it goes up, it goes up. So I likened it before to a child's education. Each year they get a little more educated, a little more educated. You can see the progress. But we are having benefits all along the way. It isn't that when the child gets the graduate education, then they get the job. No, we're having impact all the way. But I think another part of it just isn't that the adoption becomes broader and broader year by year. But the breeders are able to increase the nutrient levels also year by year by year. So for example, when you give a supplement or you have fortification, you have the level there each year from the beginning, but it doesn't change over time. I feel like the biofortification strategy, it does improve over time, and it does get better and better, and we hope that once we hit our targets, we go beyond our targets and substantially beyond our targets in terms of nutrient levels. So that was one thing. A second thing has to do with diffusion. I think once it catches on, once we get target households to adopt and we convince them, then they give seeds to their relatives, to their neighbors, to their friends. It goes by word of mouth. And so it sort of diffuses itself throughout the community, throughout the society. Traditional nutrition interventions, you give a capsule and you have to give it to everyone who you treat. So it doesn't have this diffusion sort of at no cost once you've kind of got a critical mass of people, number of farmers and consumers adopting. And the third one is something that I got from Sean Baker yesterday, that it's transformational, that when you convince a household to adopt an orange variety, say, you teach them about vitamin A deficiency and why it's treated, something goes on in their minds that transforms, and they understand why they're doing this, and it could lead to other things as well. And when you give a supplement or you provide fortification, it doesn't have that kind of transformational effect. So, thank you, Sean, for that intervention. I've had another thing I wanted to, on the next slide. I've had some comments that there's some information that we haven't been providing that would have been useful. One of the comments is that we haven't made it clear that varieties are just about to come out, where they're coming out. One of the reasons we didn't do that is because this isn't a Harvest Plus conference. This is a conference for all projects working on biofortification, so we didn't want to highlight, what Harvest Plus was doing. But I am putting up this slide, which is a table, which is in a handout, which is in the packet, in your registration packet, and it just shows the different crops that Harvest Plus, one biofortification project, is rolling out. It shows the nutrients that are in the crops. It shows our initial target countries. It shows the agronomic characteristics that we're piggybacking on. You have to combine the high nutrients with these yields, with the good agronomic characteristics. And you can see the years that in the next 3 years, we're hoping that all these crops will have varieties released in selected target countries. So that seems to be something that maybe hasn't gotten across to the whole group, although some of you obviously know that this is the case. I think a second thing that somebody mentioned to me when we talked about 1,000 days, when we talked about -9 to +24, that if you're not working in nutrition, that kind of goes past you and people don't know what that means. So the nutrition community has now come together. They're very unified that the critical time between conception and the first 24 months of life is a very critical period that if you don't intervene, there's irreversible harm to the child. So that's where the -9 to the +24, and that turns out that's about 1,000 days from conception to the first 2 years of life. So that's where the term 1,000 days comes from. So we're always having this problem with interdisciplinary communication. And so this was a comment that came up. So let me now talk a kind of a combination of a summary and the way forward. And I'm going to do that with I'm going to do it step by step, this flow chart. So what I did on Tuesday, I came up with what I thought were the 5 priority areas for investments, and I just listed them down, and I asked people to raise their hands at that point about what they thought were the most important of those 5. And I got people coming back to me, well, they're interrelated, 1 and 2 should be combined together, don't separate them. And I started to think that, yeah, it's probably better to look at this more as a system and talk about how they're related and which ones might have more priority than others. So this is how I've decided to represent this, something that I came up with yesterday. So I feel like, okay, this yellow box is the progress to date. We've made a lot of progress in the breeding. We've made a lot of progress in terms of the nutrition research. You've heard about that in the workshops. A lot to be proud of, but we have a long way to go. So I want to show you now the other boxes that we also have to make the same amount of progress in before we have a complete sustainable system in place and biofortification is mainstreamed. And you'll see there are quite a few more boxes that we have to worry about. So now we've developed varieties that are ready for release, and we're going to be able to do what I call pilot delivery programs. We still have a lot to learn about what's the best way of doing delivery on the biofortified crops. So I put a number 1 in there, and that was my first kind of key issue that I presented on Tuesday. Okay, then once we do the delivery, or before we do the delivery, we need to do baseline surveys and then follow-up surveys and measure impact. I think there were so many comments, especially on the first day, about the need to measure impact and to show impact. If you don't measure it and show it in a rigorous way, you haven't had impact, even if you have. Okay, so I have combined. I've put them in the same color in this flow chart, in the sense of, yeah, we need to do both of these simultaneously. Probably they should be done together. Okay, the next thing, my fourth, I have a 4 by there. My fourth key issue was that we had to get ownership by the agricultural decision makers. And that one of the inputs to that is showing impact, because the more we show impact and the more people know that the breeding strategy works, that's gonna have positive feedbacks with the agricultural decision makers. And then another, I think, key element in convincing buy-in from the agricultural research community is to lower the costs of breeding for these nutrients. And that was part of one of the subcomponents of my key issues number 4. Okay, then we have symmetry with the nutrition community. My proposition number 5 was that we had to get ownership from the nutrition and health decision makers. And as we've heard from, and also measuring impact is an important input into that. As they see impact and we've measured it, that will convince them that this is a viable strategy and something that needs to be done. But we've also heard, I think, very clearly during the conference that they want to see more rigorous evidence about what the bioavailability is, what the efficacy is. So it's kind of a combination of showing impact and providing the scientific evidence and the reasons why this has impact and understanding it better. Okay. Then my third proposition on Tuesday was that we had to understand much better about how food and compounds in food improve nutritional status. So we needed to do some upstream research on nutritional status. And when we had a raise of hands on Tuesday, that was probably the one that got the fewest votes. But for example, you've seen the summary that Robin Graham provided this morning, and you can see that how breakthroughs there could make the breeding strategy much, much more efficient and much, much more powerful. Okay, now we come to the money. Once we get buy-in by the agricultural decision makers, once they've mainstreamed biofortification as a core, non-negotiable breeding objective, then the agricultural research centers will put their regular funding into the biofortification strategy. And as I've said, it's just a continuous process. Year after year after year, you're raising the nutrient levels and putting them in the better and better yielding varieties. And that part of the system is sustainable. And then we have symmetry on the other side as well, where the nutrition decision makers, the nutrition donors, are funding biofortification research, funding research on understanding how more nutritious foods can improve nutritional status, especially in the food staples. But I've got another link here for the money for the nutrition donors. And I think this is probably the last link that we're going to put in place, and it's going to take a while, but we're going to keep trying until we succeed. And that is that the nutrition and health community, their donors, they recognize that investing in biofortification and agricultural strategies is one of the best ways that they can spend their money to meet their objectives of reducing malnutrition. So right now, at least in the case of Harvest Plus, 95% of our funding is coming from agricultural donors. And so we have to have the delivery, we have to have the impact, we have to measure the impact, we have to provide additional scientific evidence to finally get to the point where the nutrition community is excited about investing in agricultural strategies. Because right now, they're not excited about it. They're healthily skeptical about it. And you don't get lots of money when you're at that point. So I think another thing that I'm adding now to the diagram, that I'm adding to the mix, is that we need to do international and regional advocacy to get the ag decision makers and the nutrition decision makers on board. Okay? So that's how I'm linking it all together, and I think we have to have activities in all of those boxes, and we have to spend money in all of those boxes eventually to make the whole thing a sustainable system, because I think, at least the way my own particular way I've portrayed this, once we have everything working together in concert, then we have a sustainable system. Okay, now there are lots of details that go on inside each one of those boxes. And so that's the reason for this handout, is to go into some of the details of what's involved in each one of those boxes. Don't have time, I'm not going to go through it. This is the time when you start reading your handouts and you don't pay any more attention to what I'm saying. But it's a combination of some of my own ideas that I've put in there. The rapporteurs met yesterday. They provided some bullet points that summarized what was concluded from the workshops. I've also tried to place those in the appropriate boxes. But we still have a long way to go in terms of fixing up the lists that are on this sheet and coming to some consensus as to what the sub-priorities are and what the details are under each one of these lists for each one of these boxes. And to facilitate that process, we're going to be putting this up on a blog, and we'll send you emails and give you instructions about how to go to the blog, and we'll have a conversation over the next 2 weeks about how to improve the list, even if you have suggestions about how to improve the diagram, maybe what boxes we need to add or take out or whatever. But nevertheless, even though there's a lot of detail there, I think we have to sort of decide at the margin where we need to be spending the money over the next 3 to 5 years. Which I don't think we can completely ignore any of these boxes, but I think that we have to really decide, where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think if we combine the votes for 1 and 2, the delivery part, understanding how to do delivery better and measuring impact, I think the group voted that was the top priority over the next 3 to 5 years. When we have the second global conference on biofortification, hopefully we'll have a lot to say about our initial experiences with delivery. So I think that's what I want to say, and I hope we'll continue the conversation then.
Now that the panel has grown by when we're having traffic control problems up here, so. So now to the panelists. First up is Pamela Anderson. Oh, here's the clicker, right? Everybody will, as before, speaking from their seats with the clickers.
Good morning, everyone. It's been a very rich 2 days of conversation. So sitting last night reflecting on comments and trying to pull things together and a way forward was a fun exercise. What I heard in these 3 days leads me to propose that we have said there are 3 overarching challenges. The first one is to drive integration of agriculture and nutrition research. The second, because of the urgency, is to shorten the timeline. And the third is to more aggressively build the body of evidence for advocacy. And I want to just run through what I think those 3 challenges mean. We're making progress on the first. To hear a nutritionist stand up this morning and present breeding results says to me we are really on the right path, and it's exciting. But to echo Lawrence Haddad this week, we need to deepen the integration. And this is very important if we're going to really achieve the transformational and sustainable impact that I think we all hope for. We've talked about how targeting is important. And there is now a choir, and I want to add my voice to that we need to target the first 1,000 days from pregnancy to 2 years old. This is the young lady that becomes our target. We don't want to see that. They're the same age. She's the one who will not have the mental and physical capacity to realize her potential. So as Sean Baker said, once we understand who we're targeting, we ask, where are they? Well, if you're in Latin America, you should be looking at Guatemala, Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia. But even within the countries, we need to understand where is that stunting. In Peru, we have 5 provinces with 50 to 60% of our children stunted. Why do I need to know that? Because, as we've said, it happens in the village. We need to understand the systems. We have to contextualize the work that we're doing. Otherwise, we're not going to hit those impacts in the timeline that we need to do. We need to look at not just the commodity that we're biofortifying, we need to look at the dietary systems. What else is on that plate, and how does it vary over the year? And we need to link those dietary systems to a whole set of other systems that are going to influence our success or failure. What is the nutritional profile? Keith West said to us that we really are looking at 3 big ones, but we need to understand what the rest of the nutritional profile is. How is that affected by their disease profile? How do people earn their money and spend their time? What are the cropping systems? What are the health services that women have access to? We've talked very little about understanding gender and gender status, and that's not trivial. What is the institutional landscape? Who's making the decisions and who are our potential partners? And what's the policy environment, including regulatory, GMO policy? So there's a whole series of other systems at that level of our target system that we need to understand. And that needs an opportunity assessment, then informs our research agenda, or at least it should. If we don't have that information, we should be collecting it, and this then becomes very much a multi-community endeavor. And then we pick up where those linkages become important. Some of them have already been talked about this week, and they're exciting. We know, for example, that if you have a lot of parasite load, you're not going to absorb vitamin A. What are those other disease nutrition linkages we need to be aware of? Synergies and inhibitions because of the foods people are eating. We heard about the idea of applying zinc and seeing if we can take micronutrients up more aggressively through the soil. Or instead of delivering through just a commodity, we might want to think about cropping systems per se and how we get new foods into the system to be delivering multiple micronutrients. Gender studies. Where is the money coming into the household? We know when $1 comes into a woman's pocket, it gets put into education and food. So can we shift that? Delivery and implementation research. We do not know how to scale up. So we talk about this, but we have to study this. It's a research proposition. So is partnership. We don't really know how to partner effectively as we should to have these large-scale impacts. And we've heard some very interesting commentary this week that really goes to the next point, which is timelines, research investments that we need to get there more quickly. If we had money to put into screening methodologies, both for micronutrients and health profiles, we could shorten the timeline. Impact assessment methodologies. We do not have the time and the money to spend 3 years and millions of dollars on every single country where we want to have impact. So can't we get new methodologies out? This was a slide from Meredith Bonnerbale that makes one of those points. If you go to the very right and you look at bean and orange flesh sweet potato interaction, what it says that while beans alone could provide 20% of the projected intake for an individual, if you add orange flesh sweet potato to that, you can more than double that. There's a synergy going on. This is a hypothesis based on CAECO2 lab results. So there's a very interesting research question. What do we understand about synergies? And it's a tactical issue because what it says, if we understand this better, perhaps we can lower our breeding targets and gain ourselves some time in terms of what crops we're putting out to whom. We also know that food is going to contribute to part of the success. This is a Smith and Haddad study that's old and classic, but it says to us that women are critical. We have to understand their status and their education, thus understanding the system. What is their time constraint? Where are they going to have time to get educated? What are the health services? Are they going to be able to be educated while we're delivering other health services? We've got to be able to grapple with those systems issues in both the health services and the agricultural services. This is a study that we did that looks at the partnership profile in one area of Uganda. We need to understand through research who our active and potential partners are and who the decision makers are in what is usually very complex institutional landscape. So these are all areas that really need to be addressed by the bigger community, not necessarily Harvest Plus per se, but we need to be tracking where this information and research is going on and pulling it in. And again, to echo Lawrence very emphatically, we need to deal with educating the next generation of professionals to really take up these integrated studies. I was the first person to defend a doctoral thesis in agriculture at the Harvard School of Public Health. It was not easy. And when some young person came this week and asked me, well, where would I go to do something like that? I still don't have an answer. We need programs that will help people understand and be able to do this kind of research without having to struggle and turn it into a 10-year process. We're going to give David Lambert that assignment to find out where those programs are. Yeah, send them to Keith, to Ken, excuse me. Okay, so we've talked about the research, but then the scaling up for impact. I thought there was a brilliant comment this week about business plans. We don't tend to think about business plans. The research needs to be done as part of the research portfolio. By the time that we go to people asking for big money, we should be able to tell them, who are we targeting, how are we going to intervene, and what will it cost? One of the ways of really being more effective is what Jan Lowe and the Orange Flesh Sweet Potato team are doing, which is running multiple experiments to really deal with this as a comparative experiment. What are the options for deliveries and what is the cost benefit of each of them? That's convincing and compelling arguments. And then again, for impact, I've mentioned this, we need methodologies that are impact assessment light. We won't be able to really track the way we need to if we don't get some more inexpensive methodologies under us. I've mentioned a lot of the examples for shortening the timeline, but the general message I think that has been really talked about here is running a lot of this work in parallel so that it can coincide and dovetail and we can move from the research progressively into scaling up. And then just the last comment, which I think has been Roger's and Nicholas's message to us, is that we need, as a community of researchers and development professionals, to get a little bit more savvy about building the body of evidence and using that as advocacy for both investors and policymakers. My WIFMs are not going to be the same if I'm talking to the Minister of Finance as they will be if I'm talking to Lawrence Kent or to the Minister of Agriculture. So we need to basically think about how to pull our work together, how to transform that into compelling, convincing arguments to change behaviors and get investment into this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Brown. Pamela, can you give him the clicker? Thank you. No, the clicker.
This is the right. No, I don't have.
Oh, you didn't have one. Okay.
Slides.
Oh,
good morning, everyone. Late yesterday afternoon, Bonnie approached me. I think she realized that there were no nutritionists on the platform, and she said, "Would you be willing to jump up and say a few words from the perspective of nutritionists?" And of course, I couldn't resist the opportunity. Although those of you who work in nutrition or with nutritionists must realize no one person can speak for nutrition. We're a rather divisive community in many ways. So I'm going to be giving some personal remarks based on what I've heard the last couple of days and over the last few years in my relation with the Harvest Plus program in particular and the concept of biofortification in general. From that perspective, I'd like to say that the concept of biofortification, to my view, is remarkably simple and right on. And it should be a fairly easy decision for nutritionists to decide whether or not to support biofortification as a potential intervention for improving nutrition. It clearly would be better for populations at risk of vitamin A deficiency, for example, to consume orange flesh sweet potato than white flesh sweet potato. And likewise for populations at risk of zinc and iron deficiency to consume cereals and legumes that are higher in zinc and iron than is currently the case, assuming no changes in bioavailability or indeed improvements in bioavailability. So the concept is an easy one to accept, and I have to say that I've been a believer from the very start. But I also have a certain degree of skepticism because we can't start investing in these programs until we have clear evidence of efficacy. At least in this point in time, it is still a zero-sum game in nutrition, and anything we take away or anything we add will take away from existing programs. And I think nutritionists are very sensitive to that issue. We sit at the interface of health and nutrition, but I think many nutritionists feel like the stepchild of both of those families. And anything that would obligate us to advocate for new programs, and more importantly, to share what we perceive to be insufficient program resources for nutrition, need to be based on evidence. And so I think of the, and I should have prefaced my remark by saying that I started thinking about what I would say this morning, and I came up with a list of 8 key messages. And I did hear the message of the communication specialist yesterday, and I honed this down to just 2 major topics. And the one is we need to demonstrate efficacy. Now, I think we're far along that pathway with regard to some of the beta-carotene-rich foods. I think we still have a way to go with some of the mineral-enriched foods. I would like to just deviate for a moment and look at examples in the health arena, where I've spent most of my professional career, and think about the process that we go through in introducing a health intervention, be it a new antibiotic or a new vaccine. There is a long, rigorous, systematic course of testing that goes on, initially in animals and later in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 intervention trials before these are released for use at the population level. Even if a vaccine were perfectly safe with no risk of adverse effects, no one would dream of releasing a new vaccine without a demonstration of high efficacy. And that requires investment in a substantial infrastructure to get to that point. I'll come back to that concept in a moment. One thing I would like to caution you about is that as we do these efficacy trials, and I think we've seen some of these results already, it may be necessary to readjust the breeding targets, because ultimately our goal is to improve nutrition. And I would again like to echo some of Lawrence Haddad's remarks in his opening address, that nutrition should be the key or primary goal of agriculture, or at the very least a co-equal goal to production objectives. And I think that nutrition-related traits should be included in the list of non-negotiable core traits used as breeding targets. But we have to see those targets as flexible. If our efficacy trials do not demonstrate that we have achieved those goals, we may need to modify the breeding targets. Let me move on to my second key point, and that's the issue of implementation. I sense that there's been great pressure on the community to move quickly with mainstreaming, and I wholeheartedly support the motivation behind that call. For the past 3 years, as I think Roger mentioned in the introduction, I've had the fairly unique opportunity to divide my time between my university responsibilities and serving as regional nutrition advisor to Helen Keller International in West Africa. And one of our objectives was to develop a model for better linkages between academia and NGOs doing evidence-based programming and critical evaluation of program delivery issues and nutritional impact. And one of the first things I discovered in embarking on this adventure was the dearth of trained professionals and institutions that were available to plan, manage the programs and conduct the necessary program-linked research. To address this issue, about a year ago, we convened a workshop of local and international academicians, program managers and donors to explore the need and possible approaches for capacity development in West Africa. This is nutrition capacity development, which resulted in a strong call for action in 3 areas: advocacy at the political level, training at multiple levels across the system, and applied program-linked research implemented through a center or centers of excellence embedded in a network of local universities. The call for action was subsequently endorsed by the ECOWAS Assembly for Health Ministers, and a task force was appointed to prepare applications to donor agencies. And we've approached now more than 25 donor agencies to move this capacity development initiative forward. We have yet to receive a single positive response. I think this is extremely short-sighted of the donor agencies, and I believe it will be impossible to take the biofortification program or other nutrition intervention programs to scale and evaluate them critically without greater investments in human and institutional capacity development. Finally, in the area of implementation, I'd like to just call your attention to the fact that a great deal of effort has been and is being invested in conventional fortification programs. And there's a great deal of experience which has been generated from those programs in how to mobilize support, how to coordinate activities across diverse sectors. And again, one of the lessons learned is that fortification programs that were generated by ministries of health exclusively took a long, long time to get going. But when industry, millers, bakers who are using flours, oil producers, and refiners were brought into the process, those programs moved much more quickly. And I think there are opportunities for, I don't know if cross-pollinization is the right word, but certainly better communication between the conventional fortification stakeholders and stakeholders in biofortification, because they, at the national level, they may be working through the same communication coordination committees, or at least that's an opportunity. I think other lessons learned from conventional fortification programs are the importance of regulatory activities to support these programs, and I heard a little bit of that this morning about regulating biofortification, and I think that's something that you're all aware of and will need to continue. And of course, areas of social mobilization. There are 2 last items I'd like to mention that I've heard repeatedly, and I just want to make sure that we all understand this, and that is, with any public health intervention, my experience has been in the nutrition realm that there has been a lag of anywhere from 10 to 20 years from the time that the first science is done to the time when those programs are rolled out. And I think that's just a fact of life. I hate to accept that, but as impatient as I may be, that history keeps repeating itself. And so I just need to caution you that patience is going to be, I see I've gone way over. So let me just, I won't hit my last point. I'll stop right there and say that this has been a fantastic experience for me. I've really enjoyed listening to colleagues in the agricultural sciences. I would encourage those of you who are working on breeding issues to continue to move forward. There is a genuine need for nutritionally enhanced food products and a genuine desire for closer collaboration between nutrition and agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Brown. Arun Joshi, do you need the clicker? Okay.
Hello.
There you go.
Thank you. Well, friends, I am wheat breeder, so my voice could be different. Well, I see progress in research. After a long time, I can see it is visible in all crops. You can measure it. You can quantify it. Variation is discovered. We know sources are there. Varieties are being released with better ppm, more quantity. Agronomic interventions, very promising. Breeding and agronomic go together, 50-50, any crop production. Molecular research, I was happy to see there are markers. Transgenics moving well. And there is good networking. National system, CG system, private sector, and among disciplines. I never saw breeders sitting with such a grand group. The way forward, how I see it, continue research. Don't think research has been done and just deliver. New problems may emerge any time. It's not talking about only nutrients in isolation. It's like a moving bus. That trait was not there. So we requested, yes, please get in, but it doesn't mean we can drop other things. Food security is very, very important. We have to have sustainable agriculture. And we have to be ready for surprises. This climate change, I never knew when I was college student. Temperature is like a googly, you cannot read it. You wait for terminal heat stress, it comes in the middle. So you have to ready for everything. Crop management, agronomy, 50-50 I told. Breeders and this management practices, they go together. Then only a farmer can survive. So search for better donors, not dollar donors, I mean, genetic donors, pre-breeding. Oh, that will come later on. We have to keep on doing. And new issues, new science, integrate. The moment you get something new, okay, come on, please join. And bring more budget for major breeding programs in each country. If there's no budget, no money, nothing. It's all economics. I like economics people. I like donors as well. Nothing can be done without it. This is very, very important. And delivery, yes, it's a big problem and very important. I can see there is better understanding of ground realities and clients. People know where we have to go and what are the problems. You go with yellow maize, yellow rice and nobody will eat, then what? Who will listen your voice? So now we understand it better. So delivery is being integrated through effective linkages with organized sector, farmers' approaches, unorganized, participatory researches, private sectors, other stakeholders. It's really heartening. I can see in South Asia, private sector is growing, is really growing. And that's very important for delivery. It's not only money. It's how you reach them. And what we can do. Society is watching us. See these people. They will not let you go easily. So fast track release of varieties we have to do. How we will do it? Private sector can do it brilliantly. I can see in South Asia. And pre-release seed multiplication, don't wait that variety will release in 5 years and then we will multiply, then 10 years. And then you say, oh, tiger woods are gone, no use. We have demonstrated in CIMMYT ICARDA program through US aid project, pre-release seed multiplication of UG90 and resistant varieties very nicely. Variety is not released, we are multiplying. If it is released 3 years later, there is seed. This is what we have to do. And keep on doing what we are doing, involving farmers, seed production, continue engaging all sectors, private sectors, other stakeholders. Policy change in marketing is important. We need some support, maybe subsidy, something you will tell. If free people can tell, any other person can tell, I don't know. And spreading the message, I could read. Oh, my eye is different, I'm breeder. What I can read, it is slowly entering into global developmental agenda. There are hurdles, Friction is high, I know. But still, gradually, we are entering, and efforts are being made to integrate micronutrients into routine breeding program of national system. Go India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, they will say, oh, this variety has this yield, zinc is like this. Oh, 5 years ago, there was nothing. Only yield, yield, yield. Now this message is coming and they highlight it. Yes, my variety is zinc rich. And donors and planners appreciate more than before. I hope they are here and I'm very happy to say this. I can read their heart. Well, the way forward, all the word involve everybody. Politicians, somebody was telling, politicians don't speak about nutrients and quality. They speak about quantity, food security. That's okay, good. But why? Because they know people don't know about these things. And we speak of gender. I speak of mother. Gender is 50%, mother is 100%. It takes care of whole family. So kindly target the mother and you will be successful, I tell you. The example of deforestation, how it was stopped in South Asia. The Chipko Andolan, ladies used to go and cling to the tree, cut me first and then cut the tree. And it was very hit, successful. You will get lot of stories. Media will be there. But where are brand ambassadors? I don't see anybody from here, from Hollywood or any soccer player. I don't see. Who will listen my voice? Only you, nobody outside. If you want to be hit in South Asia, maybe in Africa it's soccer. Tell this man to sing. Zinc is zinc. Everybody will sing. I tell you. Please try it. Howdy? I can help you. Thank you. Okay. I don't know him, but I will try. My overall summary is, which I saw in Bangladesh, the confidence. This farmer was confident with the good variety. So I feel very confident. And yesterday we were talking about howdification. And my friend was telling me, Joshi, how about confidencification? I said, very good, it will hit in South Asia. I'm pretty sure. So the way forward, organize more such meetings. This man is raising question to me. I was taking his photograph and the scientist was hiding. Because here we are open to questions. We cannot say something and run away. We are answerable then. And may lead to agriculture looking towards nutrition and vice versa, which Howdy had 2 points. 2 points will come into one and we will imbibe if we have these things here. Spreading the message, this will also spread the message. And much more. I cannot see. There's a black hole. So many benefits. I can't see beyond it. Thanks to all.
Thank you, Arun. That was a brilliant reference to a googly. I believe that's a curveball for those of us in the United States, right? Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Distinguished audience, when I was invited, and thanks to Howdy and my classmate Bonnie, I was talk on challenges, but since we are on the way forward, I will talk of these challenges in the context of way forward. And I'm talking about it from the perspective of a national research system. I'm glad that we have heard that the natural genetic variation exists. But on our way forward, is this existing in the germplasm that is intended for the target group? As Ruth, as Ruth put it yesterday, especially in the developing countries, diversity is the key. For sure, we cannot address all the crops at a go. We need to start with a few, which is a good forward, the 7 crops chosen. But are we spreading wildfire in form of spreading a common genetic background across all the nations? Can we incorporate more genes that are resistant to specific areas so that at least they are sustainable, these varieties are sustainable for some time? And then, of course, the integration into the adopted varieties. It takes time, but it can be done. We have heard about it. Then when we come to the breeding side, in fact, now I should, after listening in these last 2 days, I should say breeding, stroke nutrition, stroke social scientists, stroke policy, everything. But let's start from the beginning. Do we have enough breeders in these developing countries where most of the population that is malnourished is found? A recent study in the African continent showed a lack of breeders. But thanks to the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, a program supported by Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett and Rockefeller and others, yes, we are training breeders, which is a good start. But then how about the nutritionists? Will the breeders come and evaluate up to the nutritional level? We have a gap there of which we should address, and indeed as Lawrence put it, and of which Pamela sounded, the next generation of agricultural nutritionist champions is also needed. It takes time to incorporate this resistance, or rather not resistance, these required micronutrients. But as we have heard, can be done. We only need to speed up, to do the accelerated breeding as the SIP is doing with the orange fresh potatoes. So some of this can be overcome, but of course it takes time and money. Then one challenge we have, of which we have to address, most of these areas where the people who are malnourished are, is in the tropical areas. And these are the areas which have a high prevalences of diseases and pests. And for sure, it's a challenge. We might have a variety resistant today, but it might not be cutting across Indonesia, say East Africa, West Africa, and Latin America. So as we breed forward, let's position ourselves in specific locations and see what else can we do. Then, of course, the other traits, the quality, we've been talking about them, that one is essential. Is the orange fresh potato starch enough? Some of us like it when it's hard, whether it is boiled to how many degrees, and others love it soft. So these are the qualities that, as we advance, that we face. But I'm glad the beginning has been made. And then the multilocational testing, which is also related to the standing of the pressure of the diseases and diseases, is essential, and is very expensive. More money is needed. Then, as we have had, the supply of these materials, the seed systems, are they effective? Are they efficient? What else can we add on? Can we use other innovative methods of using farmer groups, of using NGOs? And that comes to the next point. You know, it's depending on the crop. There are those ones that are colonially propagated, or the hybrids and rest. We have been using certified seed. But must we always use certified seed in the question where we need it? Why don't we move forward and we use some of the quality declared seed? Let's not just supply seed anyhow, because we shall be transmitting other viruses and diseases. But let's have the ministries responsible, the Ministry of Agriculture or any other accredited body, to have this seed quality declared, so that we are starting from a good cause of giving out good seed to the stakeholders so that it can be sustainably produced without any deterioration because of the diseases our pests would have carried. Then we are talking of the regional exchange of germplasm. It is easily said, I don't want to give examples, but to have some of these varieties cross borders is not easy. Can we work out dealing with the other partners, responsible governments, the regional economic communities, and others, and we have access of these materials cross borders? The International Treaty of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, using some of those understanding so that we can have at least where it is needed, most things move. And that is a challenge we need to address. Then the extension or advisory services, are they existing? Are they efficient? Some of these, of course, it's not Harvest Plus to address, but it is calling upon all stakeholders. And as if we recall on Ambassador Williams' presentation yesterday, effective partnership is needed in delivering the micronutrient-rich products to the intended population. If there is an additional cost of catering how to multiply, money is needed. That is not a challenge, and we should not leave it behind. I think the last slide I have, it's what we have been having and discussing all along, and I wouldn't like to lay too much on them, what I call the cross-cutting issues. The demand creation, yes, people, do they know they need to eat these micronutrient-rich products in order to improve the consumer acceptance? These are challenges. Although it has been shown, yes, orange fresh sweet potatoes has been accepted. How about others? To accept a color is not easy, but and to accept those that have come in without showing what they are reaching. So these are some of the challenges that we need to address. The product quality, of course, as we have had all along, the nutritive value, and the development of these markets is necessary. I won't dwell on this much since we've been discussing them, but those are a few things I wanted to share with you. I thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Excellent. Francisco Reifschneider.
Thank you.
That's good.
Hello?
That's good.
I thought this one was also coming from the State Department.
Yeah, probably. It's the CIA.
Okay, let me first of all congratulate Harvest Plus for organizing the conference. And since this has been titled the first global conference, I imagine that there's going to be a second and a third one. So that's wonderful. Let me also say that it is a special personal pleasure to be here today. And this is because I was associated with the creation of Harvest Plus in my previous job as director of the CGIR. So it's really wonderful to see these developments taking place. And of course, thank you for inviting Embrapa to share some views here. Howdy initially identified 5 key challenges, and the request we got was to react to those, to some of his closing remarks, and to the challenges we see as we move ahead. But I think I would like to concentrate on the opportunities that I see, and I'd like to share with you then 5 points. First, perhaps in looking at the last 2 challenges, the agricultural sector prioritizing improving nutrition and the nutrition community prioritizing agriculture, but looking at this from a different angle. And I think there is an opportunity here to help break what I identified as a little bit of an isolation of these different communities. And it's not just the nutritional, the agricultural community, the health community as well. I think you have a chance to build a strong biofort community. And perhaps this is what we are beginning to see here in this biofortification conference. But the program or the programs need to serve as mobilizer of the competencies. And these competencies need to be facilitated in their interaction. And therefore, the creation of interfaces is something very important, probably with the support from IT and a few other things. The other way of seeing this is perhaps the global conference actually begins today at the end of this conference, getting these groups together. The second point, throughout the conference, there was a discussion on the fragility that you see in relation to results and impact. Now, the fragility that you see in relation to results and impact, I would say first, it's normal considering the level of program development. So I don't think there is anything wrong, on the contrary. But it is critical, and the previous speakers have mentioned that, to emphasize what has been reached so far. The conference shows that you do have many results. Intermediary results, perhaps more than final results, but still you have many results. But the program needs to promote this. And let me give you an example. One of the first things I did when I received this folder was to open and see what were the results. I found one brochure that had one sheet saying results. I would have loved to see many more brochures with many more results from the different programs, research projects, and activities. Perhaps from a national standpoint, part of this fragility is associated with the segmentation by crop, which is something that came out very strong in some of the documents that I read. Now, we are working with crop A for country B, crop C for country X, and this and that. And as I believe Pamela mentioned, perhaps we should look at dietary systems, or at least as conjunction of crops. And there may be here an opportunity to revisit the strategy with which you are looking at biofortification. People don't eat sweet potatoes. They eat sweet potatoes and corn and rice and. Now, talking about national views and thinking about delivery, which is my third point, obviously there are many different ways of doing business. And I think we need to consider these differences as we adapt to the needs and to the requests of the different communities, countries, regions, and so on. Delivery strategies, that's the third point, under the spotlight. And it was very interesting to see this addressed in the keynote address that we had this morning. But I think you're missing a great opportunity, and I did not hear a word about greater emphasis on South-South collaboration. And I was surprised with that. I think you have an opportunity to much better mobilize the developing countries and their knowledge in relation to South-South collaboration. And this is about the delivery, and not necessarily of just food and non-food products. It can be small computers for farms in India. It can be food in northeastern Brazil. It can be many different things. But there is a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge that can and should be tapped, in my view. The strategies are not only country-specific, as we have discussed. They are specific to subnational levels, sometimes to village levels. And there are no optimal delivery strategies. What you have is a basket of different strategies from which you can draw different things. So whether it's in an Avon community type or mandatory purchase of local production, that's not relevant. What is relevant is if at the end of the day you have an impact. Now, I think you're not interested in additional resources to support the programs. But in case you are, and some slides suggested you are, perhaps there is a new era of South-South collaboration which is opening up tremendous opportunities that can be tapped, should be tapped. And I strongly recommend you to tap these opportunities. The fourth point, very, very quickly, it was not discussed, but being a Brazilian and representing Embrapa, there is a need, obviously, to talk about subsidies to agriculture, how much this distorts the markets, but more than that, how much this inhibits local production. And we were talking about local production and how important local production is, but we avoided this very, very nasty discussion on subsidies to agriculture. This is not the forum, so I will also avoid this discussion, But let's say it is critical to support changes that we believe in. And your engagement and your concerns here are also essential. Last, let me just say that top quality science, upstream research, is and will continue to be absolutely essential for this program to progress. This is absolutely essential. You have to support this, but as Howdy indicated in his initial remarks, there is also a need to show products, results, other studies, intermediary or final products that also need to be supported. But even though this may be a time to shift gears a little bit and to strengthen delivery, I share with you a major warning. Do not do this at the cost of top quality science, which is needed in this area. Do not do that. It would be a huge strategic mistake for the future. Let me just end by saying I think you have a lot to be proud of, and you should really, really celebrate that. Thank you.